Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I'm going to be answering a question of why make videos for a small channel? And I've given this answer a few times, but it comes up and it was, it's an interesting question. Everyone who has a small channel will, of course, have their differing reasons. And there are actually several, in my case. So the first and foremost of these reasons is very simply that I run this channel in order to give what I have received. I've been given various knowledge and understanding and so on, and I'm attempting to pass that on. This is, to some degree, it's one of the main functions of creation, is God gives to us and then we then give what we have been given, that as God fills us up, we then pour out of our abundance into others. And this is the technical term is secondary causation, but this is, I'd like to call it delegation. And often God gave it to us by way of somebody else that he delegated to give to us, and then we pass it on. So that's my primary purpose in this channel. And it doesn't really matter, from my perspective, it doesn't really matter how many people that is. Figuring out who actually can receive what I can give, because, it's only some people, and, each person only has so many people that they can actually give to because of the particulars of what you know and how you express yourself and how you're going to put it, what you're going to rely upon others to know. And then, of course, in the receiver, what they will understand, what their background is, and so on. And these things only match up in so many cases for any person. Some people it's more, some people it's less. But figuring out who are the people who actually can receive is just way too difficult for a human being to do. I have no way of knowing, really, even so much as what do I have to give very well. I have no way of knowing what other people can receive. So I leave all that part to God, because God knows all of that, and God can arrange that the people to whom I'm supposed to be giving something show up to get it. And I can't do that. So it's a very nice division of labor in that the hard part that I couldn't possibly even begin to do, God does, and I just do the easy part of God gave me something to pass on, and so I will. And sort of the really convenient thing about YouTube and other places I upload this to is that I really, really don't need to know who that is. I just put it there, and then I can trust God that whoever's supposed to find it will, and that might be very few people, that might be a lot of people, and it probably is going to vary with the individual video in terms of, how many people will actually benefit from seeing it. So that's the first thing, that it really doesn't matter whether it's a big or small channel, because it suits this purpose equally well either way, supposing, of course, that God will ensure that whoever should receive it does in that manner. Whoever should receive it in that manner does receive it in that manner. And I'm quite willing to trust God on that one. So that's the primary and main thing, that popularity is unimportant to this, because my videos being seen by people who won't benefit from them is, not going to benefit them. So that's the first and main thing. However popular or unpopular the channel is, that's God's job to worry about, not mine. So that's the first and biggest. Another thing which is kind of interesting, though, is the perspective on what's large, what's small. So even some of my videos that haven't done very well have gotten something like 100 views. And, it's the analytics, because YouTube gives you all sorts of analytics of how much do people actually watch, and it's always sort of this function that kind of looks like that, or probably from your perspective more like that, where however many, the total number of views, everyone sees the first second or two for the most part, and then it drops off pretty rapidly as they decide, autoplay, and then they click on what they actually want, or decide, no, this actually is not for me, or whatever. And then tends to, the curve happens pretty rapidly. So in my experience, for my videos, it tends to drop about half, and after like about a minute or so. And then it tends to level off to between 10 and 20%, depending on the video, who make it all the way to the end. And a good like 30-40% will make it a quarter of the way through, for example. So how exactly you want to count anything but the people who watch all the way to the end, I don't know. But, or you can for different purposes. But the thing is, so take one of my badly performing videos that like 100 people have watched. Much more average after a while is like 200-300 lately. Used to be more like 500-600 back when I was more active on the channel, and then various things. Maybe someday it'll get there again, maybe someday it won't, I don't know. But for the various things went like that. Back at like 500-600. But like, take the modern numbers. Take the worst video of around 100 and something people, and let's call that, let's use that 20% who watch it to the end. Let's just say, let's act as if it was 20 people who really saw the whole thing. Now, if you go and look at, like, say, a big YouTube channel who gets hundreds of thousands of views on a video, yeah, that's almost nothing. Again, serves my purpose equally well, however many people that is, because if that's the number of people who would benefit from the video that I could make there, then it's great that they all saw it. That's from my perspective, that's 100% success rate, if that's accurate, and I'm trusting God on that part. But in terms of just the human perception aspect of it, well, 20 people watching the video that I made. If I was in a room that fit 20 people, the room would be to capacity. If I was, just giving this talk to a room full of 20 people, and the room could only hold 20 people, so there was not a single empty chair, I would actually think, the room's full, I'm doing pretty well. Take my more average videos, 200-300. You're looking, 40 to 60 people who watch through to the end. It's, again, that's eventually, after a month or two. If I'm in a room with 50 people who, sit there and listen and, seem to derive some benefit from what I'm saying, I would count that as doing really well. That's so far outside of what I, normally I talk to one person, maybe two people at a time, when I can, talk about things and so on. I'm in a few chat rooms with like 4 or 5 people in them. In terms of people who actually, relate and we understand each other and so on. So, reaching 50 people is doing astonishingly well compared to how I normally do. And again, if this were like, if this were that same room crowded with 50 people, there were people, standing around that can't even sit down, like, wow, you think yourself doing really well. Take those same people and put them into an auditorium that could fit, 500, and yeah, it'll look like a pretty sparse crowd. But that's all a matter of what you're comparing it to. And when it comes to something like a YouTube channel, there's no reason that you should compare it to something particularly large. I mean, you can easily compare it to 0, and it's incredibly bigger than 0. And that's not being fatuous or facetious. You really can, because the alternative could be not doing anything. You're not reaching anybody that you through a video that you don't publish. So again, a lot of it too is about what you're comparing it to, and there is no reason you need to compare yourself to people who are wildly more popular than you. I mean, you could if you want to. You can, do that and consider yourself a failure. You can not compare yourself to other people at all and just compare yourself to what are your other options. So now, if I could... if I was on some lecture circuit and I could easily, give lectures to a room full of 5,000 people, and instead I were doing a YouTube channel that had a reach of 50 people, yeah, then obviously you why the heck would you be spending your time here when you could benefit so many more people in this other way? And so, when it comes to the trade-offs, because none of us have infinite time here, all of our lives are temporary, and we all only get, 60 minutes per hour, as C.S. Lewis once observed, that there's an allocation of resources issue, like why would you bother? But for somebody who isn't in that position, I know I sure as heck am not in the position of being able to be on a lecture circuit, giving lectures to rooms full of thousands of people. there's no point in comparing yourself to other people and how they're doing, discussing different things differently than you're doing. There's only really a point in comparing how you're doing to how you could be doing otherwise. And so, at least for me, this is actually doing fairly well compared to my other venues. The other venues that are open to me. And so, yeah, it's small in comparison to lots and lots and lots of channels that are out there, but it's a heck of a lot bigger than it would be otherwise. So, I'm actually doing really well in that sense. I've been given, been given this opportunity to give to a far larger number of people than I ever normally would be able to give to, or that I am normally able to, other than via this means. And so, it's to some degree, it's a question of, perspective. And I'm not saying like choose the most convenient perspective, but rather to choose the most relevant, useful perspective. And the most relevant, useful perspective is not how do I compare to somebody doing other things, doing them differently, but what else could I be doing? Now, I don't mean to say, by the way, that it's impossible to conclude that, like, okay, nobody needs me because they've got, so many other people who are doing so much better a job in literally every way that, like, there's no possible point to me doing this. And it's possible to conclude that. There are circumstances in which it is possible to conclude that. But that's really, really easily solved by looking around and saying, like, do I have anything to add to what I have seen being said? And if the answer is no, well, then don't do it. And if the answer is yes, then there's going to be something you have to give. May not be to many people, but giving to even one person is really quite a privilege in this world. So, and of course, if you can happen to find, if it is literally just one person and you know them, then, well, it may just be more efficient to talk to them. At the same time, one of the other things about these sort of videos is that they're around for a while and encounter people that you may not ever know you would encounter later on. I've got videos up that I did years ago that will have been seen by people I've never met and never heard of, and so on, and didn't even particularly dream about, years ago when I started the channel and did some of the earlier videos. So, yeah, it's and then there's also, things like, these videos are around for my children, for example, as well, who are very young right now, but at some point will be old enough. And so, there's also, over time may become useful to them, and in like manner may become useful to people who couldn't even have received at the time I was saying it. It's a little bit like writing a book. And look at St. Augustine. Look at all the people St. Augustine has helped writing the Confessions back at this point 1,600 years ago. All the people down through the centuries he's helped that he couldn't possibly have dreamed of. But by putting it into some lasting format, it goes out. And, I don't want to oversimplify, because the modern digital world especially, is permanence is by no means its major hallmark. But at the same time, that's also true of paper. Just look at how many books are out of print and so on. So, this world, everything in this world is temporary, and we have no way ourselves of knowing how temporary any particular thing we do is. Occasionally, they may last a really long time, or they may end far quicker than we ever expected. And either way, they'll all be gathered up into eternity at the end of time by God. And so they all will have actual positive value, however many moments of time they happen to be in right now. So, right now from our perspective, obviously. And, yeah. So, that's why I run a small YouTube channel. I don't find it discouraging. It's a little possible to find discouraging, like when, trends go down, for example. But even there, you just need to remind yourself of why you're doing it and what the purpose is. And individual videos do better and worse. And sometimes, what's really weird is sometimes, like, they'll be around for a while and then suddenly they'll start doing better. And then equally suddenly they may well stop again. And so the complete unknowability of all of this stuff beforehand does, I think, make it a bit easier to remind yourself of the fact that I have no idea who this stuff is supposed to be seen by. God knows. And he's the one who can actually do something useful with that information anyway. And I really can't. Especially because it's entirely possible that some of the people I have no way of meeting. And, it's possible, I'm here in America in the year 2021. For all I know, a video that I do is going to be seen by, an Australian in the year, 2031. And, for all I know, I'll be dead before then. And, in that circumstance, I would have no way of contacting such a person. Can't imagine I'm ever going to Australia. It's not literally impossible, but kind of unlikely. And so it's one of those things that, I have no idea. I've even if I knew, I'm not about to go and go fly over to Australia to meet some person just because I should have a conversation with them. Ultimately, like if God spoke to me out of a cloud and told me to go do it, okay, fine. But, so far in my life, God hasn't exactly made a habit of like talking to me in straight out words coming out of clouds. So, I've generally been, like I gather most people are, left to figure things out more, in a less obvious and more, you have to discern actively, sort of way. But leaving out, voices coming out of the clouds, I couldn't act on a lot of this information. Now, especially, by the way, if like there's somebody who in the year 2031 should hear this and I'm going to die tomorrow because I'm hit by a meteor or a bus or get sick or, whatever, I couldn't possibly act on that information. And so, the mere fact that I could even if I had it, I couldn't necessarily act on it, but God can. That if this video is supposed to be seen, or some video that I make is supposed to be seen by that hypothetical Australian in the year 2031, and I die tomorrow, God will ensure that that video somehow gets over to him. Maybe still on YouTube, maybe copied somewhere, taken off of YouTube, and then, but, copied somewhere and then somehow shows up. One of the stories I really like, one of the more amusing of the stories, where you see God's sense of humor in the Gospels, is the one with the fish, where the officials come and say to Peter, does your master pay the temple tax or no? The half shekel temple tax or no? And Peter says, yes, of course he does. And then he goes off and sees Jesus. And before he can say anything, Jesus says to him, Peter, from whom do the sons of the princes of the world demand tribute? From their sons or from foreigners? And Peter says, from foreigners. And he replies, then sons are exempt. But, so that you will not give offense, go and cast a hook into the lake, take the first fish that bites, and look in its mouth. There you will find a shekel. Give it to the authorities for you and for me. And I love this convoluted way of paying this tax, that he has Peter go and take a fish out, and there will be the coin to pay. But it speaks to the way in which indirectness is in no sense a problem for God. We, being so finite and having so little energy and such limited intellects, we like very straightforward, direct things. But, orchestrating the natural world such that there's this fish with a coin in its mouth that will bite at this hook at the precise moment that Peter lowers the hook into the water, or at least such that it's the first fish that bites, not a problem for God. Perfectly fine. Completely, in some sense, ordinary way for God to orchestrate things because, of course, well, God is God. And so, in like manner, if my video is supposed to get to somebody, then, people being sinful is not going to get in God's way. And if my video is not supposed to get to someone, well, then there's no problem, is there? So, hope that answers the question. And until next time, may you hit everything you aim at,